More than 10,000 listings per day, with a focus on professionalism, old 6. How could I be Lao Liu? I just want to help more people. What? What does it matter to me if the demon clan is going to be destroyed? The Hetu Luoshu was voluntarily given to me by his Emperor Jun, or it was forcibly given, otherwise I wouldn't want it. The atmosphere of the wilderness was not caused by me. If you don't believe me, you can ask me for accurate guidance. I took you Hongjun as my elder brother, but you ended up being my adoptive father. So, standing in front of you is the demon master of the demon race, the holy father of the human race, and the Buddha of the West. In time for rain in the north, the demon tribe calls for protection. Kunpeng, the defender of peace on the desolate land. Keywords of the novel. Honghuang. Kunpeng is not Lao Liu. No pop-ups, Honghuang. Kunpeng is not Lao Liu. Download the complete text, Honghuang. Kunpeng is not Lao Liu. Latest chapters to read. Chapter 1. People in Zixiao Palace are snatched seats at the beginning. You are listening at novel full.audio. Chapter 1. People in Zixiao Palace are snatched seats at the beginning. There is a system, but it doesn't take up much space. Please rest assured to consume it. Zixiao Palace. Like light and dust, Mu is like a clear breeze. Zhongling is graceful, and the clouds are flourishing and rosy. Auspicious clouds dot the surroundings. Intrauterine. A proud voice sounded. The wet spawning and egg transforming generation, the cloaked and horned disciple. Also worthy to sit on the same level as me. Hu Ziqing just woke up from his daze, and the memories in his mind gradually revived. Nima. I've traveled. At this moment, a Taoist dressed in tattered clothes and with a sorrowful face squeezed him out of the cattail. The person who just roared was none other than Yuan Shi Tianzun, one of the three cleans. The person who squeezed him out of the futon was Zhuanti. That's right, as you imagine, he is the unlucky guy who was robbed of his seat. Kunpeng. One of the famous old 6 in the wilderness, during the final battle of the Lich demons, he saw that something was not going well and took away the eye of the Zhou Tian Xingchen formation, Hetu Luoshu, which indirectly led to the defeat of the demon clan. He is also an enduring villain in the novels of the wilderness. Either hit his face directly and make him forever submit to the demon race. Either eat it and mutter while eating. Koan is so big that it can't be stewed in one pot. And the scene just now was a scene of fame and prosperity, where Red Cloud gave up his seat and he was robbed of his seat. In fact, it can also be imagined that Kunpeng is the only one. Sitting in front of her, Sanqing shares the same breath, while Nyuhua has the elder brother Fushi. Even the Red Cloud that had given up its position had Jin Yuanzi standing by, which was Kunpeng, without any companions. Who will I bully if I don't bully you? Leaving aside the Red Cloud next to him who asked him to give up his seat, Kunpeng didn't speak, but found a seat and sat down casually. And his glance alerted Jin Yuanzi next to Hongyun, looking at Kunpeng with a warning gaze, and then anxiously at Hongyun. Kunpeng shook his head and thought to himself. You are truly a good friend. However, Hongyun still has to die. He glanced at Hongyun just to see what the more unlucky old man in the wilderness was like. Hongyun had Hongjun to tidy up, so he didn't need him. Because although he was robbed of his seat, he also knew that this seat was already unstable for him. The choice of becoming a saint is not solely determined by 6 cattails. Sanqing has the blessing of enlightenment, and when becoming a saint, all you need to do is establish a religion to bring out the merit of enlightenment. It belongs to the inheritance of the wealthy second generation. Nyuhua is due to her merit in creating humans. And the reason for receiving accurate quotes is that Hongjun owed the Western cause and effect during the Long Han Cataclysm. A holy throne given to repay cause and effect. I want 2 people to help him pay off his debt. So the way for the two to become saints is to make a grand wish and take out a loan to become saints, also known as Huabei saints. What kind of scumbag is Kunpeng? If he really sits on it, he probably won't have any bones left. As for what can become a saint with the Honghuang purple chi, it is all virtual. Even if it was given to him, he couldn't hold on to it. I didn't see that even if I took the Honghuang purple chi, I still couldn't become a saint. In the end, because the tree was tall and caught the wind, I ended up in a situation where my body was dead and my path was dispelled. At the moment he sat down, a voice suddenly came to his mind. Ding, the strongest old 6 system has been bound. As soon as the sound of the system fell, Kunpeng's mind also had basic information about the system. As long as it is one's own behavior, the system will make a judgment and award rewards based on the degree. After Kunpeng obtained the system, of course, the first thing that came was excitement. Along with it comes a slight sense of frustration. Because if you want to become the 6th in the wilderness, the difficulty is not usually high. Except for the foolishness of the Wu tribe, all other great powers are the cultivation of the primordial spirit and the recognition of heavenly secrets. Do you want him to go to 6 others? They can calculate causality by pinching their fingers. Not to mention big bosses like Jun who fit the heavenly way. How could he dare to be the 6th? The system probably also saw his concern and sent a prompt. Ding, congratulations to the host for obtaining the beginner gift pack. Chaos Beads, Damaged Version, Chaos Pearl, along with the Heavenly Axe, Chaos Green Lotus, and Creation Jade Plate, is one of the 4 greatest treasures of chaos. The pearl contains a chaotic world within it. It has the effect of covering up the sky. When Pangu opened the sky, the Chaos Pearl was damaged, and now only the Chaos Spirit treasure level is missing in his hand. But covering up the mystery is enough. After all, the fragments of the Creation Jade certificate in Hongjuan's hand are at most at the level of Chaos Spirit treasure. Kunpeng suddenly felt relieved at this moment. With the Chaos Pearl, Hongjun can't even count him. He shouldn't be the 6th, who should be the 6th? Thinking of this, Kunpeng couldn't help but smile. And the 3,000 guests from Zixiao, who were relatively close to him, thought to themselves. Why is Kunpeng so silly? He was robbed of his seat and can't help but laugh. Of course, the people around know that there is a certain chance for the 6 seats at the front. But because my speed was too slow and I didn't want to offend the big shots in front of me, I didn't go to grab it. If they were to know that the 6 seats represent the 6 saints, it is estimated that Zixiao Palace has now turned into a melee. However, at this point, the people around him no longer paid attention to Kunpeng. Because Hongjun has come out. I saw an old man in a white robe, unable to see the specific appearance clearly. When walking, it may seem like being on the ground, but in reality, it's like stepping in the air. Step by step, a lotus grows, and a purple aura blooms. Although seemingly ordinary, everyone watching feels like they have seen the truth of heaven and earth, as if they are in a state of panic and awe. Upon reaching the main position, Hongjun slightly raised his hand. Wake up! And the 3,000 guests in the purple sky finally woke up like a dream. Kunpeng also exclaimed in his heart. Is this a saint? It's so terrifying. Hongjun lightly glanced at the 6 people in front of him, as shown by the sky, they were all the same. A smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and he nodded before speaking to everyone. Since you have crossed the chaos and arrived at Zixiao Palace, you are all destined to be with me. Then he looked at the 6 people in front. In the future, the seats will be fixed and no more disputes can arise. Kunpeng felt a little disdainful in his heart. After the robbery is over, we can't start the dispute. It's truly you, Hongjun. Kunpeng is willing to call him the first old Yin Bai in the wilderness. After the founding of heaven, many heroic figures have been defeated by the Dragon Han Cataclysm. Now, apart from Hongjun, there are only Yangmei Ancestor left. And the ancestor of Yangmei cannot enter the wilderness yet. To summarize for him, it would be: sell out Taoist friends, collude with enemies, and do not uphold morality. This time we will preach the Tao of Dalai Lama, preaching for 3,000 years, which is exactly the 3,000 great paths. We hope that you will have a deep understanding with your heart. Kunpeng pondered for a moment in his heart. Preaching for 3,000 years, merging 3,000 avenues, and 3,000 mortal guests in the purple sky. Is it necessary to unite the way? Start preaching. Hongjuan's voice, like the sound of a great road, reached everyone in the purple sky palace. At this moment, Hongjun frowned slightly and raised his hand. The law does not spread to the 6 ears. The people around were somewhat puzzled, so they had to bow their heads slightly and show respect to the sage. Kunpeng, on the other hand, thought that it was probably a fight against the 6-eared macaque. As Kunpeng imagined. At this moment in the wilderness, a monkey with 6 ears and a small body listening suddenly let out a scream. Its 6 ears spurted blood and it fell head down. After Hongjun finished his 6 ears, the sermon officially began. The Tao is void and natural, connecting to all things, and is the wonderful essence of all things. The void is also the name of the absolute righteousness. Therefore, those who practice the Tao should not hold on to it in the void, but should be completely devoid of it. As soon as the sound of the Tao comes out, the sky in the purple sky palace is in chaos, and the ground is filled with golden lotus. The mystery is endless, and countless spiritual energies from heaven and earth gather here. Everyone present, including Kunpeng, was already mesmerized by this moment. True words echo through the hall, and endless laws emerge within the hall. 3,000 mortal guests are naturally not ordinary people. Those who can reach the purple sky palace from chaos are all those with great roots, great understanding, great opportunities, and great creation. Under the sound of the Tao, the breath of the people in Zixiao Palace kept rising. Practice has no time, and 3,000 years of time are fleeting. The first Hongjun had already stopped preaching. Is it over? In the purple sky palace, everyone cast hopeful gazes at Hongjun, who was in power, but Hongjun turned a blind eye to the gaze around him. This 3,000-year sermon is over. I have attained the holy throne and preached 3 times, each time for 3,000 years, for a total of 9,000 years, which is the limit. This sermon is over. The next sermon will be scheduled in 10,000 years. At that time, we began to preach the path of sanctity. 3,000 guests bowed their brows and thanked him. Saint's mercy. In my heart, I constantly speculate about Hongjuan's quasi-holy path. At this moment, Kunpeng was contemplating his attitude towards Hongjun. In the past, in the epic novels he read, Hongjun was always the big boss behind the scenes, and basically the protagonist had to go against the sky. But now, what level is Hongjun? The system probably wouldn't dare to force him blindly in front of him. What would it do to die on its own? At least in the early stages, we still need to maintain a pleasing attitude towards Hongjun. And what are you? I am Lao Liu. Thinking of this, Kunpeng came up with a plan. Just as Hongjun was about to leave, Kunpeng shouted loudly. Saint, wait a moment. New books for collection and follow. Up reading, end of this chapter. Chapter 2, please allow me to call you Dao Zu. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Chapter 2, please allow me to call you Dao Zu. As soon as the words fell, not only did Hongjuan's footsteps stop, but everyone around him also looked over. The primordial heavenly sovereign among the 3 cleans pursed his lips and said, I don't know the number of days. Emperor Jun thought to himself, is Kunpeng going to cause trouble? And Hongyan Zenyuanzi said, the saints have already been ordained, which seat is he still thinking about? The 12 ancestors which on the side said, why are these foolish birds still dragging around? For 3,000 years of preaching, it cannot be said that one knows nothing about the ancestral which, but it can also be said that one is completely ignorant. Except for Hetu who barely understood a few sentences, everything else was at a loss. If it weren't for the fact that Jun was really impressive, he would have slipped away at the beginning of the lecture. They are just silly, not really stupid. Jian was a bit uneasy in his place, not knowing which side Jun was actually helping. At this moment, Jun's eyebrows had furrowed, and he also estimated that Kunpeng was due to his seat. Staring coldly at Kunpeng and focusing his gaze, the sage's majesty and aura also emanated at this moment, oppressing Kunpeng. "What's up with you?" The tone revealed dissatisfaction, indicating that if you don't give me some explanation, it won't be as easy to talk about. But Jian's heart was filled with great determination, and he thought sarcastically. Kunpeng is so damn. Taking his seat is to save his face, how dare you report it? In front of everyone's eyes, Kunpeng bent down and bowed to Jun, saying. The sage has great compassion and opened the way for us to preach. Kunpeng thanks the sage here. The disdainful expressions of the people around suddenly emerged. I couldn't help but think to myself. Apple Polisher and Jun was even more indifferent. This level of flattery is like a child playing house in his eyes. Does his noble sage still need you to thank him with a small big luo? Kunpeng still hasn't positioned himself properly. Just as I was thinking about whether or not to slap Kunpeng out, I heard him continue to say. The sage preaches for 3,000 times and is our teacher, as well as the ancestor of the immortal way. Please accept our respect for you as the ancestor of the way. After hearing this, not to mention the 3,000 mortal guests, even Jun himself had already stood up, his expression somewhat uncontrollable. The smile on my face was a bit unbearable. Flattery. What kind of flattery? Flattery is certainly annoying, but he calls me Dao Zu. Me, am I now the founder of Taoism? What is his purpose for preaching? Isn't it just to collect qi and gain recognition from the heavenly Tao as soon as possible for the sake of harmony? Otherwise, is it really for the benefit of the flood and famine? What are you thinking? His predecessor was one of the chaos demon gods, who was chopped to death by Pangu. And who among the 3,000 guests in the purple sky was not transformed by Pangu? Either the spirit, essence, and blood, as well as the left and right eyes, are basically the second and third generations of the Pan dynasty. He made his enemies stronger. The gift of fate has already been priced in secret. Free is the most expensive. Seemingly to make you listen, but everyone who comes to listen has been drained of their luck. The people around were stunned. Can you still flatter like this? At this moment, Jun's expression changed from a cold and slightly resentful expression to joy. Looking at him with an appreciative gaze. And Kunpeng snorted at this moment, circling around with a unique sinister expression. You haven't seen Dao Zu yet. The crowd was still eating melons, but they never expected that the fire would suddenly burn onto themselves. Sanqing. What are you pretending to be? Introduction. How could we not have thought of it? 12th Ancestor Witch. What kind of Taoist ancestor does not have a Taoist ancestor? My father is the greatest. 3,000 other customers. But whether they were as proud as Sanqing or Zuwu, they all had to lower their heads and shout together. Dao Zu. Dao Zu. There's no way, Saint Wei is just there, even the most reckless ancestral which dare not refute. And the sound of the system also rang out just in time. Ding, detected the behavior of host Lao Liu and obtained the divine power of leisure travel. Kunpeng is not in a hurry to follow the system's message. But he stood there with a simple and honest expression, calling out to everyone as the Dao Zu. When Jun heard Kunpeng make everyone present call him Dao Zu, he felt the gathering of energy on his body. The 3,000 people who come to listen to the Tao represent at least 90% of the qi fortune of the vast land. He has received recognition from these people, which means that his Taoist ancestor has been established. More importantly, he also felt that the progress of his collaboration had accelerated significantly. So Hongjuan's gaze at Kunpeng became even more appreciative. Hongjun cleared his throat. You must not. How could I be called such a poor person? However, even if it was Zuwu, one could hear a burst of excitement from Hongjuan's tone of refusal, not to mention other people. Junti opened his mouth and was about to say something. Kunpeng spoke directly and loudly. If even saints cannot be considered, then no one can be considered. Please, saints, do not refuse our wishes. Kunpeng can be considered to be at the mercy of Hongjun, but Hongjun has no dissatisfaction at all. I increasingly feel that Kunpeng is on the road. Finally, he shook his head with a bitter smile. It's okay, it's okay. That's what Er and others said. Kunpeng still harbors great contempt for Hongjun in his heart. When they become emperors, they have to give in 3 times, but Kunpeng was already prepared and Hongjun refused several times. Then he made another ultimate kill, saying that if he didn't agree, he wouldn't get up, but he didn't expect that Hongjun wouldn't be able to withstand it in the second attempt. Look at your anxious appearance. Kunpeng. Look, it's urgent. Hongjun. I just want to improve too much. Hongjun looked down at the respectful and honest Kunpeng below, and the more he looked, the more he felt it pleased. With a casual wave of his sleeve, Kunpeng stood up with a force. And the other people lying on their stomach are indifferent. Hongjun looked at Kunpeng with a smile and then said. I see that there is nothing to protect my little friend's body. However, the flood and wilderness are dangerous. I am now giving you the Northern Shenyuan water control flag to protect your body. Then a spiritual light was struck by Hongjun next to Kunpeng, and it could be vaguely seen that it was a small black flag. 3,000 guests around were stunned when they saw it, and Nima flattered them to get a top-notch innate spiritual treasure. This TM is simply outrageous. The guiding sight on the side is about to drop its eyeballs. I keep thinking in my heart. Flattery. I can do it too. Then there was some regret. Why was I one step slower just now? And in a corner of the Zixiao Palace, in the heart of the underworld river, I couldn't help but feel as if I had lost something. Kunpeng didn't rush to retrieve the Lingbao when he saw it, mainly highlighting one that remained unmoved. But instead, the acting skills improved, with a somewhat sorrowful expression on his face, desperately wanting to squeeze out a tear. However, his emotions were not in place, and he only had a sorrowful expression on his face, but he still had to make do with it. After bowing down, he said. Kunpeng, how could he be so respected by saints? After speaking, he bowed to Hongjun. At this point, Hongjun was even more satisfied. Nodding at Kunpeng. I'm not a white-eyed wolf, I know how to be grateful. Not bad. Not bad. Just now, Kunpeng's attitude clearly placed him as a saint above the top-notch innate spiritual treasure. Lingbao remained unmoved on the side, but respected himself as a saint with a childlike heart. What he didn't know was that Kunpeng believed that since the things had already been given, they would definitely not be taken back. So sooner or later, it's not that short. After giving a big bow to Hongjun, Kunpeng finally collected the Northern Shenyuan water control flag and said. Peng dare not accept the treasure of Dao Zu, but given by the elders, he dare not refuse. I will definitely take good care of this item for the sage. Hongjun smiled again, this young man is really good. In fact, Kunpeng's statement also dispels some people's desire to seize. After all, Hongjun later bestowed the Eastern Prince with a dragon head cane to oversee the male immortal. Even if Emperor Jun killed the Eastern Prince, he obediently sent the dragon head cane back and dared not swallow it privately. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. True Accuracy in Judging People. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. True Accuracy in Judging People. Hongjun glanced at the restless crowd lying below, then lowered his head and respectfully looked at his own Kunpeng. I couldn't help but shake my head, it was simply incomparable. Let's all get up. Everyone quickly stood up. I'm still cursing Kunpeng in my heart. He refused to say even a word of gratitude to Emperor Dao Zu. At this moment, Zhundi found the opportunity and then stood up and knelt down again. Dao Zu. The West is barren, and neither of us have any protective treasures. Jian also knelt up and looked eagerly at Hongjun. The nose of the Yuancher heavenly lord on the side is getting angry. He didn't expect to sit with such shameless people, he really lost their face. And the other 3,000 mortals don't think much about it. They themselves were also eager to see Zhundi soliciting treasures. Because if they also kneel down and flatter themselves to obtain a top-quality innate spiritual treasure, they can kneel through this purple sky palace. Hongjun saw the appearance of Zhundi Jian. My great mood was directly destroyed, even wanting to kill both of them. However, considering that these two people were still key figures in the subsequent plan, they could only snort coldly, wave their sleeves, and then throw them out of the purple sky palace. And other people with ideas also became timid and restrained at this moment. Hongjun glanced at the other purple sky guests, then nodded to the Kunpeng who was looking at him with respect, admiration, and admiration. Only then did he leave lightly. The people around just breathed a sigh of relief and turned around, ready to leave the Zixiao Palace. And Kunpeng, standing in place, suddenly knelt down and loudly said, "Farewell to Dao Zu." The faces of the other people who turned around were blue and red, and they thought to themselves, "Why is Kunpeng so shameless?" But the others thought that they had already turned around, and that the Taoist had already left. What else did they pretend to be, and quickly walked out of the hall, ashamed to be with these people. However, Hongjun, who had already left the main hall, showed a smile and sensed the purple sky guest, who had not turned his head, and let out a soft snort. Only Kunpeng has a heart. After waiting for Hongjun to leave for a while, Kunpeng finally stood up and walked out of Zixiao Palace. Outside the palace, I saw Zenyuanzi and Hongyun preparing to meet and leave. Kunpeng quickly shouted to Yuanzi in Hongyun town, who was about to leave, at this moment. "Two Taoist friends, wait a moment. These two people can't leave first." Red Cloud had not yet felt anything on his side, while Zhen Yuanzi protected Red Cloud with one hand and looked at Kunpeng with a wary expression. "What's up, Taoist friend?" Kunpeng's face showed a half-smile expression. What do the two Taoists think is the matter? Hongyun was somewhat puzzled, but Zenyuanzi frowned and said, "The person who snatched your seat is Zhundi Jian, and there is also Yuancher Tianzuan, which has nothing to do with brother Hongyun." The good old man only realized at this moment. I still thought to myself, "Hey, isn't it just one seat? What a big deal." Then he looked at Kunpeng kindly. Kunpeng saw the silly look in Red Cloud's eyes and immediately didn't want to talk to him. Instead, he looked at Zhen Yuanzi and said, "Taoist friend, do you know that this seat is not easy?" Zenyuanzi hesitated for a moment before nodding. The 6 cattails in front of Zixiao Palace are well known to everyone, and their position is not easy. Otherwise, how did you start grabbing seats? Hongyun suddenly realized that he was a bit embarrassed about Kunpeng's seat being snatched. Although it was not snatched by him, it is also related to him. Kunpeng Daoyou, this time it was really my mistake. In this case, I owe you a favor from Hongyun. You can come to me if you have anything in the future. After hearing this promise, Kunpeng nodded in satisfaction. Then I said goodbye and left directly. Zhen Yuanzi looked at Kunpeng's departure, but his eyebrows furrowed because he always felt that things didn't seem so simple in his heart. Kunpeng left just because of one favor. It feels like thunder, heavy rain, and small dots. And Hongyun still has a simple and silly appearance. Old friend, let's go back quickly. Your fruit must be ripe too. Upon seeing the heartless appearance of Hongyun, Zenyuanzi suddenly felt a bit overwhelmed with tears and laughter. Still no more thought, shook his head, anyway, troops for the enemy, earth for floods. Even with him and his old friends, he is not afraid of Kunpeng playing some tricks behind his back. But what Chen Yuanzi didn't know was that Kunpeng wanted this favor because of a top-quality innate spiritual treasure. That's right, it's the 99 scattered soul gourd of Red Cloud. He will certainly go over the matter of snatching gourds when the time comes. And this favor is the key to making Hongyun give him the gourd. Ding, detected the host's behavior of Lao Liu. Reward the Demon Master Palace refining method. Does the Demon Master Palace still use you to teach me how to refine? Well, he really doesn't know how to refine. Kunpeng arrived outside the Purple Cloud Palace, revealed his prototype directly, and flew back to the North Sea. The back of a peng is unknown for thousands of miles, angry and flying, its wings hang like clouds in the sky. Kunpeng flew back and began to look at the 3 rewards given by the system. Of course, the chaos ball is not a problem. Kunpeng decided to go back to his hometown and study carefully. And the divine power of wandering freely in Kunpeng is very excited. Shentong. Xiaoyao Yu has 2 meanings. The first one is speed. If he used to soar up to 90,000 miles, now it can be said that this speed has directly doubled. And another one is change, which can mimic the breath of others. If Kunpeng evaluates it, this is not what he wants to be the 6th, it's the system forcing him to be the 6th. System. Ah, yes, yes. The second reward is the refining method of the Demon Master Palace. It's not called the Demon Master Palace yet. Kunpeng, known as the Demon Master, only began after this sermon. Because after listening to Hongjuan's preaching, he imitated Hongjuan's return to preach to the creatures around Beihai, which is why he was called a Demon Master. And Kunpeng saw that the most important step in refining the Demon Master Palace was to preach to the living beings on his own, gain recognition from the Demon Master's position, and then integrate his merits into the Demon Master Palace. In this way, it can be made into the ultimate spiritual treasure in the future. After he creates the demon text, incorporating merit can transform it into the treasure of postnatal merit. And now Kunpeng naturally has to follow the plot. As soon as they returned to Beihai, a few small minions came to greet them. Kunpeng has not finished transforming these forms yet. One seems to be a mixed blood dragon race, half transformed, and there seems to be no problem with his body. It is a congenital Dao body. As a result, the head is a dragon head with a tail at the back. Other people are also quite different, either there is a problem here or there, and they cannot see a healthy person's shape. Kunpeng took a deep breath when he saw these crouching dragon and phoenix chicks in his old nest. If passed down, I plan to emulate the teachings of the Taoist ancestors and preach to the creatures of Beihai in 100 years. All creatures in the wilderness can go to my Beihai. Although my subordinates don't know why my boss seems a bit unhappy with me, I still have to listen to his commands. After all, most of those who disobeyed Kunpeng in the North Sea have already gone to reclaim land. The new book issue is 3,000 per day, and once it's published, it's 10,000 per day. Don't raise books, everyone. The starting point is through a platform for following up, and there are also requirements for following up when it is put on the shelves. If the following up is not enough, it will take 300,000 yuan to be put on the shelves. Additionally, poor data can also affect the author's emotions. It is possible that if you see poor data, you may not write anymore. Therefore, even if you want to raise books, please turn to the last page of the novel every day. Thank you very much for your support. Thank you very much. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Response from all parties. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Response from all parties. The news of Kunpeng preaching in Beihai was intentionally spread throughout the entire flood plain within 100 years. After the news spread throughout the wilderness, the creatures of the wilderness began to boil. I think Kunpeng is truly merciful, bringing benefits to the creatures of the flood and wilderness. After all, the other people who returned from the Zixiao Palace did not have the intention of preaching to them. Even in the Zixiao Palace, those who shout to revitalize the West are still contemplating the content of Honghuang's teachings in seclusion. How can there be any time to preach? Who is good to them, can they not know? So the magnificent scene of the wilderness that can be seen is that countless creatures begin to rush towards the North Sea like pilgrims. Hearing the Tao in the morning, one can die in the evening. In this extremely serious era between portals, besides Honghuang, the second person willing to preach is Kunpeng. And Zixiao Palace is not something that these weak beings with weak cultivation can go to. Little did they know that the first to go to Zixiao Palace was not just 3,000 guests. Just some are hesitant in the face of chaotic winds, while others are directly killed. The ancestor of dragon veins and the mountain of 10,000 ancestors. Kunlun. After receiving the news that Kunpeng was going to preach in Beihai, Yuanshi Tianzun disdainfully shook his sleeve. It's ridiculous that even those who wear their hair and horns, those who are trapped by flies and dogs, dare to imitate the teachings of the Taoist ancestor. Yuanshi Tianzun is certainly very dissatisfied now, thinking that even things like Kunpeng are worthy of preaching. What's the use of preaching for a group of ants? Things that are not worthy of being seated with oneself in the Zixiao Palace, and now being praised by the creatures of the Honghuang, how can the always proud Yuanshi heavenly sovereign bear it? Then he thought about Kunpeng getting a top-notch innate spiritual treasure by flattering him, which made his heart even more angry. Even his primordial heavenly sovereign didn't have many spiritual treasures to hold. Meanwhile, Tai Ching Laozi beside him remained silent, only his closed eyes suddenly opened upon hearing the news, shining with a glimmer of light. Tong Tian is completely different from his two older brothers. When he heard Kunpeng's preaching that all creatures in the wilderness could go, his heart suddenly became interested. There is education without discrimination, it's the same as my way. Thinking about it, why not go to Beihai to give a lecture yourself? However, due to his second brother's jealousy towards Kunpeng, he also finds it difficult to express any thoughts about going to Beihai. Tai Ching Laozi opened his eyes and looked at Yuan Shi, who was sulking, and Tong Tian, who was a bit restless. He shook his head and said, "My three brothers should continue to remain secluded and observe the supreme path passed down by the ancestors of the Enlightenment Road, sitting and watching the clouds rise." After speaking, he closed his eyes. After hearing this, Yuanshi Tianzun gradually calmed down and thought to himself, Kunpeng is preaching for the creatures of the flood and wilderness, let him speak. He's just being stranded on the main road for a few ants, sacrificing his roots and pursuing the end. But Tong Tian felt a slight regret because he was still thinking about whether he should secretly run out. Now my older brother said that after we close down together, he won't be able to go out. Sun Star. Emperor Jun, Tai is currently discussing. The news of Kunpeng preaching came, and Tai scratched his head. Brother, what is the purpose of Kunpeng preaching in Beihai? Emperor Jun pondered for a moment, but finally shook his head and said, I don't know either, but with Kunpeng's unprofitable and quick-witted nature, there must be something he wants. He doesn't believe that Kunpeng is a selfless person who preaches for the sake of the vast world. Although it is not clear what his purpose is now, there must be a calculation involved. After all, when he was in Zixiao Palace, he flattered his ancestors and not everyone looked down on him. Who knew that Emperor Dao Zu had given Kunpeng a top-notch innate spiritual treasure in reverse? You should know that his companion Lingbao, Hetu Luoshu, is only at the level of top-notch innate Lingbao. He was certainly very envious at the time. If it weren't for Kunpeng saying he was helping Dao Zu keep it, he would have thought about whether he would directly snatch it. And of course, Tai did not have such an idea. Compared to others, Tai can really be considered the chosen son of heaven. After all, it was accompanied by the innate treasure Chaos Bell, although he shamelessly changed its name to the Eastern Emperor Bell later on. This is an innate treasure that is both offensive and defensive. Even the Sanqing Laozi, transformed by Pangde Yuanshan, was accompanied by the Xianhuang Linglong Pagoda, a treasure of postnatal merit and virtue. This is not the son of the version. What is this? Actually, it is more appropriate to say that the son of Liang Jie. The two of them were talking about Kunpeng preaching when they heard someone visiting outside the Sun Star. A fairy-like character with a strong moral character, displaying a refined demeanor. Holding a feather fan in hand, gently fanning it, as if pondering, then shouting towards the Sun Star. Bai Zhe seeks to meet Emperor Jun and two Taoist friends. Upon hearing Bai Zhe's voice, Tai Yi felt somewhat surprised, while Di Jun's face moved and he said. Let's go, the two of us, go and welcome you, Daoist Bai Zhe. Not at the foot of the mountain. The Wu tribe. After the news of Kunpeng preaching in Beihai arrived, Zhu Rong sneered and said. That birdman is still learning from the old man Hongjuan's teachings. I'm laughing to death. As the eldest brother, Emperor Jiang glared at Zhu Rong at this moment. Fifth brother, be cautious. Zhu Rong muttered and said. What are you afraid of? That old man in the Pangde temple can't hear you. Emperor Jiang shook his head helplessly and agreed with Zhu Rong's statement in his heart. But at this moment, he let out a sigh. Everyone was puzzled, looking at the Emperor River, only Hetu felt lost in thought. Emperor Jiang saw this group of foolish Hetu beings feeling helpless and had to start explaining. I went to listen to the teachings this time, but ended up with nothing. It's all because I, the witch clan, don't have any primordial gods. Xianming, the only two female prime ministers of the 12 ancestors Wu, asked. Big brother, if he gains nothing, he will gain nothing. I, the witch clan, am still afraid that he won't be able to wait. The other ancestral witches also shouted. That's right, that's right. Who dares to offend our witch race in the entire wasteland? Seeing Xianming and a few others, Emperor Jiang knew that they had not come up with an idea. This time, Hongjun preached the Luo, and everyone else has already made great progress. The next time, it will be Zhuansheng. The strength of other creatures in the wilderness is gradually increasing, but we are stagnant. When Emperor Zhang's concerns were expressed, other ancestral witches also reacted. Everyone has some concerns. And the most hot-tempered colleague Zhu Rong cursed and said. What are you afraid of? If it doesn't work out, let's just kill those people and see how they grow. Then he gave a hopeful look towards Emperor Jiang. Big brother, as long as you say, do it, we'll go. Emperor Jiang couldn't help but shake his head when he saw his reckless younger brother. What was the reason why he first went to listen? Of course not to learn something from Hongjun. They feel that they still need some kind of Hongjun to inherit their father's legacy. Just because when Hongjun became a saint, the momentum directly oppressed them and they couldn't stand up at all. It wasn't until I climbed into the Pangde temple that I improved a bit. At that time, he realized that there were people outside and heaven outside. They also went to Zixiao Palace to see how powerful Hongjun was. After witnessing it, I realized that a saint cannot be defeated. The current situation is that their status as witches seems to have become somewhat unstable. In the tens of thousands of years before Hongjun preached, it was natural for the Wu tribe to become the hegemon of the entire wilderness. Images such as belligerent, domineering, reckless, and brainless have deeply penetrated people's hearts. In fact, it's not that they have no brains at all, it's just because they can directly defeat the enemy with force, without needing any brains. After the Longhan Rebellion, the three clans of Dragon, Phoenix, and Qilin fell into desolation, and the chaos began with the struggle of thousands of clans. But in fact, the so-called struggle among thousands of ethnic groups is just food for the witches. And now the Wan ethnic group is also being eaten into one by the Wu ethnic group. The Yao ethnic group. It's not that other races want to join the demon race, but rather that they are eaten into the demon race by the witch race. Of course, there were also reasons for Emperor Jun's coercion later on. The Wu tribe has gained nothing from listening to the teachings now. But what about the others? So now Emperor Jiang feels a sense of crisis in his heart. Emperor Jiang pondered for a moment before saying, "We are starting to shut down in the temple this time. We must find a way to break through Dalai Lama. Hongjun said that next time we will talk about the right path to enlightenment. As soon as you hear it, you can tell that it is the realm above the Dalai Lama and below the sage. Although the sage will not end up now, if other people can break through the Great Luo and no one from the witch clan can break through the Great Luo, the demon clan, which is gradually becoming a rope and has already shown signs, will not let them go." After Emperor Jiang finished speaking, the smallest Hetu among the 12 ancestral witches said, "Brother, I still want to go for the next lecture." Other ancestral witches are certainly puzzled. "Little sister, what else are you doing?" Hetu lowered his head and did not speak. Emperor Jiang thought for a moment and spoke up. "Let the little girl choose for herself. If you want to go, go." He knew that Hetu was the last one among them to be born, so he was also the least affected by the evil energy. Perhaps the primordial spirit has not been completely eradicated yet. If your sister wants to listen, go ahead. If Hetu goes to listen to the Tao, it can be considered as a two-handed preparation. If your own path doesn't work out, then take a look at Hongjuan's path and see if there is a solution. Thinking of this, Emperor Jiang also sighed and declared seclusion to the other witches, not breaking through the Great Luo and not leaving. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Receiving the grace of the Ancestor and spreading the way to all sentient beings. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Receiving the grace of the Ancestor and spreading the way to all sentient beings. 100 years later, Kunpeng has refined the prohibition of Chaos Pearl more than 10 times, but compared to the 64 prohibitions of Chaos Pearl, it is simply a drop in the bucket. Mainly due to insufficient cultivation, the difficulty of refining is really too high. On the contrary, Hongjun gave him the Northern Shenyuan water control flag, which was refined quite quickly. There are a total of 48 prohibitions left, and there are still more than 10. And the Northern Shenyuan water control flag can also be directly taken out. It's impossible for him to directly take out the Chaos Pearl to confront the enemy, right? Due to refining magic treasures, my cultivation has been somewhat delayed. Now the realm has finally broken through to the middle stage of the Great Luo Golden Immortal. After Kunpeng refined and passed the level, he was startled at the sight of it. I don't know how many creatures have gathered here in Beihai. When I saw Kunpeng come out, I was immediately nervous because Kunpeng's reputation in the wilderness has never been very good. The people around me didn't know who started and then started speaking loudly. Farewell to the Lord of the North Sea. A group of people reacted and paid their respects to Kunpeng. And Kunpeng can also be considered to have experienced the pleasure of Hongjun this time. However, what others Hongjun teaches are all elite students, and as for Kunpeng, they are basically all crooked melons and cracked dates. Because, like the dragon, phoenix, and Qilin, a very large ethnic group, they actually have their own traditions, and they disdain the teachings of Kunpeng. Only those casual cultivators and some foolish individuals will come to listen to the teachings. However, Kunpeng doesn't care about these things. He just wants to earn merit and win the position of Demon Master. As imagined by Tong Dijuan, he has a character of not getting up early for any gain. Kunpeng first asked everyone to get up, and then spoke in a low voice. This is the Kunpeng from the North Sea. Meng Hongjun, the founder of Taoism, preached and received the favor of the founder. Today, it is 1,000 years of preaching in the wilderness. Hongjun has only talked about 3,000 years, and of course he cannot surpass his boss recklessly, so 1,000 years is just right. After hearing this definite news, the creatures on the North Sea were overjoyed and busy bowing to thank Kunpeng. But Kunpeng said seriously at this moment. This is the creation bestowed upon you by the Taoist ancestor. You should thank the Taoist ancestor more. After hearing this, sentient beings roared loudly. Thank you, Dao Zu. Like other great powers, Hongjun was also watching Kunpeng's preaching and heard Kunpeng mention himself, as well as the gratitude of sentient beings towards him. Hongjun stroked his beard and smiled, nodding. Kunpeng keeps talking about my goodness. This child knows how to be grateful. Feeling recognized by all sentient beings in the wilderness, the speed of unity became even faster. And of course, Jane Zhundi, who is far away in the west, also came to the North Sea to peep, preparing to take advantage of Kunpeng's preaching to see if there are any people who are related to the west. As for what is destined to be with the west, those who have great opportunities, strong roots, great intelligence, and weak creative power are all destined to be with the west. Upon hearing Kunpeng flattering at this moment, Zhuanti disdainfully said. This Kunpeng is really shameless. He even wants to establish a relationship with the Taoist ancestor after talking about the Tao. And Kunpeng knocked at the sky and shouted loudly. Kunpeng imitates the ambition of Dao Zu and spreads the message to Beihai. I hope Dao Zu agrees. When everyone felt that Hongjun could not pay attention to Kunpeng, a series of sounds came from outside the sky. Good. Then Kunpeng said. Thank you, Dao Zu. That's when I put myself away. Hongjun couldn't help but nod when he saw Kunpeng's movements. Not bad, really good. At this moment, Kunpeng began to preach. Kunpeng's preaching is certainly not as comprehensive as Hongjuan's, but the scope of his preaching is more comprehensive than Hongjuan's. Kunpeng started talking about the path of immortality, mainly about his own experiences and insights. As for what Hongjun said, he has not fully understood it himself, so of course he will not use it to indulge others. The sound of Tao echoes in the North Sea, and the incalculable amount of spiritual energy is practiced together in the North Sea, causing the spiritual energy to constantly gather in the sky above the North Sea. Of course, when it comes to the spiritual quality of Zixiao Palace, it can be considered a small witch to a big witch. At this moment, Kunpeng felt a mysterious aura echoing on himself. There seems to be something exploding on my body. 1,000 years later, the preaching was completed. Of course, everyone was still unsatisfied, but Kunpeng directly said. After 1,000 years of preaching, everyone can disperse. Although everyone had some regrets, they dared not say anything. Just as they were about to leave, they heard a fairy in the shape of an ape with 6 ears on its head quickly stand up and say. Lord Kunpeng preaches for our group of demons. He should be our teacher, the teacher of our demon clan, and can be called a demon teacher. After Kunpeng finished preaching, he still thought about when he would be called a demon master, but he didn't expect to come now. But when you hear this fairy say something, he always feels a bit strange. Who are you imitating? But now he also understands Hongjuan's feelings. It's really nice to have a sensible little brother under his hand. Just as he was thinking about whether he wanted to make 3 concessions or not, sentient beings had already knelt down and shouted in their mouths. Pay respects to the demon master. Ordinary creatures are much smoother than powerful beings like Sanqing. When they were in Zixiao Palace, the 3,000 red dust guests were not as skilled as these little demons. After all, the 3,000 guests of Zixiao are all powerful in the wilderness and know how to be reserved. A wave of luck accompanied the merit that Kunpeng had just preached descended from the sky, and a golden airflow landed on Kunpeng's head. Sanqing, located far away on the Kunlun Mountains. Before the other Taiqing and Tongtian could speak, Yuanshi Tianzuan called out directly. Merit. This is impossible. Emperor Jun Tai on the sun. What? Emperor Jun turned his head to look at Tai and said. Look, we must not underestimate this Kunpeng. And in the vicinity, the receiving site is stunned. Is this TM okay too? Zhuandi's eyes straightened as he looked at the thick golden airflow above Kunpeng's head and said to Jane. Senior brother, how about we start preaching when we go back to the west? But after thinking for a moment, he shook his head and said. I'm afraid it's not possible. Kunpeng is the first person to preach in the wilderness, which is why the heavenly way has bestowed merit. If I'm not mistaken, there may still be the title, Demon Master, in it. Zhuanti thought for a moment and it seemed like this was indeed the case. Although according to reason, Hongjun is the first person to preach. But, Hongjuan's family preached outside the sky, while Kunpeng was in the wilderness. So Kunpeng received recognition from the heavenly way. The main purpose of the Taoist preaching is to plan the luck of life. As for merit, he can't even use it after he joins forces. Kunpeng saw the merit descending from the heavenly way and did not integrate it into his body. Instead, he infused the merit into his own palace. After seeing it, the people in the wilderness were deeply saddened. Introduction. Is this Kunpeng foolish? Don't you need to improve your cultivation? Yuanshi heavenly sovereign. A waste of heaven, a waste of heaven. Tong Tian. Do you not need to improve your cultivation without merit? Have ambition. Emperor Jun. Is merit wasted like this? Fushi en Yua. Why is this merit so? Then everyone saw Kunpeng sacrificing his huge palace directly, waving his hand to summon the 6 Ding divine fire and continuously throwing heavenly and earthly treasures into it to start refining the palace. At this moment, Yuanshi Tianzuan, who is good at refining weapons, naturally saw what Kunpeng was doing. Does this Kunpeng want to turn his palace into a magic weapon? After the question was first raised, Yuanshi Tianzuan immediately continued to say. Foolish people talk about dreams. Then he began to educate Tai Ching and Tong Tian with his professional knowledge of alchemy. He observed that the palace of Kunpeng was only made of ordinary materials and did not have the conditions to refine it into a spiritual treasure. Adding materials inside was also a waste. Upon hearing the explanation from Yuanshi Tianzuan, Laozi and Tong Tian nodded. I highly recognize my second brother's proficiency in refining weapons. The Fantian seal, which will shine brightly in the future during the divine tribulation, is the proud work of Yuanshi Tianzuan, taken from the broken Buzhou mountain. And at that time, when he was refining this thing, he had already surpassed the sage. Now see Kunpeng wanting to refine an ordinary palace into a spiritual treasure. Impossible, absolutely impossible. Other great powers in the wilderness are also observing Kunpeng's weapon refining in public. Yuanshi Tianzun was originally disdainful of watching, but after a few glances, he was immediately attracted by the system's refining method, and his eyes couldn't move away at once. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. This palace deserves the name of a demon master. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. This palace deserves the name of a demon master. And the anomaly in the North Sea continues, even intensifying. The Demon Master Palace is constantly restructured in the refining process of Kunpeng, and each restructuring requires the nourishment of heavenly and earthly treasures. In this process, heavenly and earthly treasures gradually integrate into the Demon Master Palace. Hundreds of years later, apart from those who were obsessed with refining tools like the Yuanshi Heavenly Master, there were very few others watching. As for Zhuanti Jian, I don't know if he has secretly transformed into several waves of monsters in the West who have a connection with the West. The people who had previously listened to the teachings also left this area under the organization of Kunpeng, except for the monkey who was just the first to speak up and call Kunpeng Demon Master. Mainly because the monkey doesn't want to walk on its own. And this monkey just helped Kunpeng, so his subordinates didn't rush him away for a while. Just let him watch from not far away. With a sudden roar, thunder rolled in and an oppressive aura from the heavenly Tao descended on Beihai. In the midst of the chaos, everyone's gaze returned to the North Sea. But Yuanshi Tianzuan's eyes were gloomy, and he said with a heavy tone. We're going to succeed. The gaze of Tai Shang and Tong Tian was immediately drawn away. They didn't expect Kunpeng to refine his weapon for hundreds of years, and they hadn't paid attention to it hundreds of years ago. Now Kunpeng seems to be about to achieve success, but what they can't believe is that Kunpeng's weapon refining has brought about a heavenly calamity. The appearance of Tianjie indicates that Kunpeng's level of skill in this practice is definitely not low. At this time, the sky thunder gradually matured. Kunpeng learned from the system method that in order to integrate merits and become the treasure of acquired merits, one must go through the baptism of heavenly calamity. So without any hesitation, he directly sacrificed the palace to his own head. And at this moment, the sky thunder also landed. 49 heavenly tribulations, a total of 30.6 thunderbolts began to fall on Kunpeng's Demon Master Palace in sequence. The Demon Master Palace became unstable under the thunder. Yuanshi Tianzun disdained Kunpeng's behavior and said, "A person who doesn't know the number of days, even if they are lucky enough to refine a magic weapon, they will not be able to use it. The magic weapon has not yet been officially formed, how can they directly resist the sky thunder? If he were himself, he would just take down the heavenly calamity. If it's really not possible, he can also borrow his elder brother's heaven and earth Honghuang pagoda. Do you still need to use newly refined and incomplete magic weapons to block it?" However, Yuanshi Tianzun is actually more jealous of Kunpeng, because Kunpeng directly refined an exquisite postnatal spiritual treasure with this skill. And now he is still struggling to refine the top-grade heavenly spirit treasure. The main reason is that the accumulation and cultivation of Yuanshi Tianzun are not enough, and he is not like Kunpeng to cheat. And Laozi Tongtian also felt puzzled. A slightly impatient and puzzled person said, "Isn't this Kunpeng given the Northern Xianyuan water control flag by the Taoist ancestor? Why not take it out for defense?" Laozi remained calm as usual, without answering, but his gaze did not shift from the Demon Master Palace at all. And Yuanshi Tianzun let out a heavy snort. In order to preach to the group of wet and egg-like people, those who wear their hair and horns, it is estimated that the treasures given to him by the Taoist ancestor did not have time to be refined. She shook her head as she spoke. A short-sighted person. The 4 or 9 heavenly calamities have already been brewing to the end, and this one looks even more robust than all the previous ones combined. Just from a distance, one can glimpse the power of destruction. Zhuanti Jiayin, who was pulling people to strengthen the West, saw the Demon Master Palace floating in the sky, which was shaken by thunder. This Kunpeng has refined such treasures, but he doesn't know how to cherish them. If it were given to my brothers, the West would have grown stronger again. At this moment, the last heavenly calamity that had been brewing for a long time finally came to an end, and Kunpeng had no intention of reclaiming the Demon Master Palace. Then, the anger of the thunder, representing the heavenly way, struck down fiercely, and everyone present heard a click. Zhuanti touched his arm and couldn't help but smile. "Senior brother. It seems like it's broken." Then he shook his head. "What a pity. If only this treasure belonged to me in the West. If he were allowed to bring up the treasure, even if he risked his life, he would have saved it." And other great powers in the flood and famine also showed a gloating look. On the Sun Star, Tai shook his head and said, "Is this Kunpeng foolish?" He actually made sense when he said this. After all, the level of the 4 or 9 heavenly calamities seemed terrifying to ordinary beings, and even their great powers felt a bit headache. As a result, Kunpeng surprisingly used an unfinished magic weapon to block it. Isn't this just a pure and silly behavior? Although Emperor Jun was also puzzled in his heart, he had already understood that Kunpeng was not as simple as it seemed after gaining previous experience. Although the situation is now clear, after all, the Demon Master Palace has already been shattered, he still feels that there may be a reversal. There is no other reason, just judging from Kunpeng's performance, Kunpeng cannot be that kind of foolish person. Because although this group of people may face some trouble in the face of thunder calamity, everything is still within a controllable range, and Kunpeng must have his reason not to stop it. Of course, there may be a slight accident now. After all, the Demon Master Palace has already been shattered. For Emperor Jun, it is also a good thing that Kunpeng has not been refined. In his big plan now, Kunpeng is also one of the people he has recruited, of course, as his subordinate. If Kunpeng had another top-notch postnatal spiritual treasure, along with the Northern Xianyuan water control flag bestowed upon him by the Taoist ancestor, it would be difficult to attract. Hongyun, who was watching while eating ginseng fruit in Longevity Hill and Zenyuanzi, shook his head regretfully. It seems to have been shattered by lightning, what a pity. Then he took a mouthful of ginseng fruit and continued. In the future, I will find a treasure to give to Kunpeng, let's forget about our last favor. Next to him, Zenyuanzi rolled his eyes, thinking to himself that his old friend was really kind-hearted. But speaking of which, isn't it precisely because of Hongyun's kindness that Zenyuanzi recognized this brother? It can only be said that every peck and drink has a fixed number. After seeing Kunpeng's failure, the disdainful expression on Yuanshi Tianzuan's face became even more. He. Without fists or courage, one's position is disorderly. And when everyone thought the excitement was about to dissipate and Kunpeng's treasure failed to be refined, suddenly a golden light emerged from the interior of the Demon Master Palace. At a glance, everyone could see that it was Kunpeng's merit in breaking into the Demon Master Palace at the beginning, and then he began to repair the crack caused by the thunder without hesitation. After seeing this scene, Jane Zhundi murmured. It seems to be merit. That's how this merit is used. Yuanshi Tianzuan's eyes were about to crack, his hands trembled, and he shouted in a pitiful voice. How could this be possible? Seeing Kunpeng seem to have been successfully refined, it's even more uncomfortable than killing him. And Tai Qing frowned and looked at his second brother Dao's unstable expression, then let out a soft roar. Be calm. At this moment, Yuanshi Tianzuan realized that he had almost fallen into a magic barrier just now. I made a bow to Tai Qing. Thank you very much, big brother. Tong Tian did not notice the situation of Yuanshi Tianzun, but nodded in the direction of Kunpeng. Okay. Everything has a glimmer of vitality, even in destruction like thunder, there is still a glimmer of vitality left. This Kunpeng is an interesting person. Yuanshi Tianzuan had only slowed down when he heard his younger brother praising Kunpeng. He couldn't help but turn black again, even darker than before. And it was only then that Tong Tian noticed his second brother's appearance, but he was puzzled. Kunpeng was far away in the North Sea refining a weapon, which didn't hinder him, but he didn't expect his second brother to almost go crazy because of this. If it weren't for Yuanshi Tianzun being his second brother, he would be ashamed to associate with such people. In fact, in general, Yuanshi Tianzuan is not like this, although he is a bit sharp and sarcastic, and although he looks down on Kunpeng. This time, mainly from the time of preaching, his face was constantly hit from beginning to end by Kunpeng. He has always claimed to be the master of refining tools in the wilderness, but he never expected to be easily surpassed by Kunpeng now. On Kunpeng's side, under the restoration of merit, the Demon Master Palace gradually returned to its original state, and the radiance of the treasure was even greater than before. And the coverage of a golden light also indicates that this is not an ordinary top-notch postnatal spiritual treasure, but a top-notch postnatal merit spiritual treasure. Murder does not involve cause and effect. Kunpeng saw that the artifact had been refined, but he had not yet named it. It was previously called the Demon Master Palace and had not been finalized, only using a substitute name. Kunpeng laughed up in the sky and said with great joy. This palace deserves the name of a demon master. After speaking, with a wave of his hand, the plaque outside the palace shimmered with gold and immediately turned into 3 vertical characters. Demon Master Palace. After seeing this scene in the wilderness, Deneng also knew that Kunpeng's treasure refining was really over now. Zhuanti looked enviously at the Demon Master Palace in Kunpeng's hand and said restlessly. Senior brother. If we both have this spiritual treasure, why worry about the West not prospering? At this moment, I also fantasized about the future prosperity of the West. What the two of them don't know is that the West has indeed flourished in the future, but they have also become saints of Huabei. I estimate that the borrowed funds have not been fully repaid after the trip to the West. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. I accuse you of slander, you slander me. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. I accuse you of slander, you slander me. Sun Star Emperor Jun looked at each other with a disdainful expression. If Yuan Shi Tianzun had been slapped in the face by Kunpeng from the beginning, then now Tai Yi is similar to this. They never expected Kunpeng to have such a skill. At the beginning, they were puzzled and even mocked by Kunpeng's incorporation of merit, but now Kunpeng has directly crafted a top-notch postnatal merit spiritual treasure. This transaction is definitely a steady profit and not a loss. And Emperor Jun felt that this Kunpeng calculation was really terrifying. It's like taking 10 steps at a time, and even before he started refining the magic weapon, he probably had already thought about incorporating merit. If we think further, did he already have a plan for preaching? In fact, everyone's initial idea about Kunpeng's preaching was that he wanted to flatter Dao Zu. After all, the slogan they were fighting was to emulate the Taoist ancestor. After gaining merits, they were already surprised, and now it's even more amazing. Emperor Jun remained silent for a long time before finally speaking. Let's go and discuss with the great sage Shirazawa. After Kunpeng finished refining the weapon, he slowly shrunk the Demon Master Palace and put it in his palm. He doesn't have the habit of giving his magic weapon to others. After everything was over, he slowly landed on the old site of the Demon Master Palace. And all these little brothers around, along with the 6-eared macaques, shouted together. Congratulations to the Demon Master for refining the treasure. Kunpeng first saw these little brothers around him. Looking at it, I couldn't help feeling a headache and didn't know how to handle it. He actually feels puzzled about why Kunpeng, formerly, should take in some younger brothers. Because these little brothers are all a group of crooked melons and cracked dates, not a single high-quality subordinate. It seems like a major force in the North Sea, but in fact, it's just a group of dragging oil bottles. It's okay to accept some high-quality apprentices, but it's not possible at all. However, the skill of flattering is still good, and the efficiency of handling affairs over the past few hundred years to disperse other creatures is also good. But Kunpeng doesn't need these at all. After the establishment of the Emperor Jun Demon Court in the future, it is estimated that they will come to Beihai to acquire territory. Those 2 golden crows are not easy to deal with. Kunpeng felt that he was still able to survive in this desolate environment. To become a mature 6th, one needs others to overlook oneself. Kunpeng's plan is to gradually move closer to people like the sticks, who are few yuan away from the sea of blood. As long as that effect is achieved, when he sneaks out and goes to 6 others, no one will suspect him. And now these subordinates are not helping him, but becoming a burden. Kunpeng thought for a moment and then threw out some heavenly and earthly treasures to these subordinates. Where did you come from? Go back where you came from. After hearing this, the younger brothers were momentarily stunned, and then they didn't even look at the treasure bestowed by Kunpeng. With a sliding shovel, they knelt down in front of Kunpeng and wept, saying, Demon Master, if we do something wrong, we will make changes immediately. Please don't disperse us, Demon Master. We are already the creatures of the North Sea, where else can we go? Demon Master, we can't do without you. And Kunpeng thought that this group of people had been doing their best for hundreds of years, so he thought it would be better to gather and disperse. He explained. My fate with you has ended, let's leave now. You can no longer be called a member of the Demon Master Palace in the future. Of course, the younger brothers are not satisfied with this answer and are about to cry while holding Kunpeng's leg. And Kunpeng, seeing this trick, doesn't he understand it yet? I am very adept in front of the Taoist ancestor, and these little brothers are far inferior to my own Taoist skills. Licking Emperor Dao Zu's own head was truly amazing. Even a bird's head and wings had not yet formed, and Kunpeng wanted to hug his thigh. Kunpeng kicked him away without exerting any force, but the effect was very explosive. At this moment, of course, it shook everyone around, and Kunpeng frowned and said. Give face, don't take face, right? Just as he was about to sweep these people away with one hand, his divine sense suddenly moved and he noticed two sneaky Taoist priests doing some sneaky tricks. Exactly the right approach. But Kunpeng's eyes lit up at this moment. Hey, the person he doesn't want can be dumped to Junti for guidance. These two people are going crazy to revitalize the West, so of course they won't refuse. But Kunpeng didn't hesitate and flashed directly in front of Junti Jian. Originally, Kunpeng's speed was already exaggerated, but now it's not just about having a leisurely journey. So, how can we compare the speed with Kunpeng when receiving accurate guidance? When Junti and Jian were just swept by Kunpeng, they knew they had been discovered. As they were busy thinking about running away, they saw Kunpeng standing in front of them. Junti and the two of them looked bitter when they saw the main leader coming. They were discovered by the great powers of the East many times when they were trying to revitalize the West, and of course, some escaped or were directly caught. And when people from the East catch the two of them, they will certainly be beaten up. The two of them don't have any magic weapons, and their cultivation is considered the weakest. It's really barren in the West. Even if there are no treasures, the spiritual energy is particularly scarce. If it weren't for the natural selection of the West, it would probably be difficult to break through Dalai Lama. Seeing Kunpeng catching them, he immediately thought that he couldn't avoid being beaten up today. After all, we had already established a causal relationship with Kunpeng when we snatched a seat last time, and now we have been caught again. But what was different from what they had imagined was that Kunpeng did not offer a magic weapon to beat them. Instead, he held hands and made a bow and said to the two with a smile. Don't be safe, Taoist friends. Jian gritted his teeth and was somewhat uncertain about Kunpeng's attitude. He tugged and brought back a gift. My brothers have met Daoyou. Kunpeng nodded and did not speak, but instead looked straight at Jian Junti. The two of them were so frightened by Kunpeng's gaze that they finally stood up and said. I have not yet thanked the Taoist friend of Zixiao Palace for giving up my seat. He mainly wants to see Kunpeng's attitude and whether he wants to tear his face off them. If so, he would immediately entangle Kunpeng and let his senior brother run first. If not, then there is room for tension. After hearing this, Kunpeng's eyes lit up, but his face still had the same smiling expression. The favor of giving up my seat. Those two Taoist friends owe me a big cause and effect. Jian and Junti never expected Kunpeng to let go so easily. They quickly nodded and said. That's right, my brothers owe my fellow Taoist a big cause and effect. The main reason is that the two Western people now feel that they are already poor and worthless, and the so-called big cause and effect is simply a sprinkle of water for them. Anyway, I owe it for now. Let's leave the rest to the future. After all, the two of them don't know they can become saints now. Kunpeng, on the other hand, is thinking about the future of the two investors. He knows that the two of them are the destined saints of the future. And of course, this great cause and effect is for the future layout. Looking a little further away means being a deity, or even when traveling further west. Although the witch plague is still brewing. So now both sides believe they have made a lot of money. The sound of the old 6 system also sounded at this moment. Ding, determine the behavior of the hosts Lao Liu, calculate the accuracy of the plan, and reward 12 sea god beads. Seeing that Kunpeng had no hostility, Jian and Junti breathed a sigh of relief and began to become happy. However, at this moment, Kunpeng's face changed and he suddenly became serious. Are you two Taoists plundering my Beihai creatures? A questioning directly scared the two of them, who were supposed to have escaped a disaster, into a cold sweat. They didn't expect this to happen again. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Sincerity is the ultimate skill. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Sincerity is the ultimate skill. Junti, of course, followed the principle of crying, making trouble, and hanging himself 3 times. He began to wipe away his tears and said with a bitter expression. Brother, the West is really barren. Ba Lala began her speech. Originally, Zhundi thought that Kunpeng would remain unmoved like other great powers, even interrupting his speech in advance. However, he did not expect Kunpeng to listen very attentively and with a sympathetic expression on his face. Kunpeng sighed and said. The two Taoist brothers have indeed suffered. Zhundi and Jane almost shed tears when they heard Kunpeng's words. Because both of them have always aimed to revitalize the West, but the great power of the East sees them as bereaved dogs, each time ranging from mocking to directly beating them up. How could they not be moved to meet Kunpeng today, who is so heartwarming and understands the two of them? And what moved the two brothers even more was still to come. Kunpeng waved his finger and pointed to the little brother who was still blindly standing there, then said. The two Taoist brothers have worked hard to revitalize the West in the face of the flood and famine. As a member of the flood and famine, Kunpeng should also contribute his own efforts. In this way, I will hand over some of my subordinates from the Demon Master Palace to the two brothers and help them revitalize the West. If the two Taoist brothers still lack people, they can continue to come to my Beihai. Kunpeng will not obstruct them. Upon hearing these words, Zhundi was initially incredulous and froze in place. After reacting, he was so excited that he took 2 steps forward and grabbed Kunpeng's arm. His mouth trembled and he couldn't speak for a moment. After a while, he hesitated and asked. Are you serious, brother? Kunpeng nodded without hesitation. Of course. Kunpeng speaks without hesitation. Upon hearing Kunpeng's answer, Zhundi couldn't help but burst into tears. The only one who understands my brothers is Brother Dao. And the nearby guide is also like this. Kunpeng is such a good person. Compared to those bastards like Emperor Jun of Sanqing, the Kunpeng brothers are simply a beam of light in their darkness. If anyone dares to say that the Kunpeng brothers are petty people now, don't be shameless. The two of them dare to rush with anyone. Kunpeng said he supports their Western cause, which is different from those who say they support but mock them both behind the scenes. It's really impressive. Although Kunpeng looked down upon his younger brothers in his heart, thinking that they were a mob. But for Jian Zhundi, who has been poor for a long time, the people Kunpeng has given are like rain after a long drought, making them the best candidates for building the West. Kunpeng originally intended to dispose of these little brothers. But I don't know how many years I've been with Yuan Kunpeng, and I've been with myself for hundreds of years, so it's naturally impossible to kill them directly. At first, he thought of giving them some natural resources and treasures, so that both parties could get together and part ways. But now that the introduction is accurate, he naturally wants to plan a good future for them. After all, after receiving the guidance of Zhundi, one can become a saint and even establish a rebellious Buddha. After these little brothers have passed away, they can also be considered as shareholders holding original shares. Although it is not said that all of them are Buddhas, it is not too much to prove the position of Lehengwo, is it? So Western religion can really be considered a good place to go. The two sides hit it off at once. Jian and Zhundi originally thought Kunpeng would send some minions to them as he just said. But unexpectedly, Kunpeng wanted to give all the original members of his Demon Master Palace to his brothers. This directly moved the two brothers once again. After living in the wilderness for so many years, during the Zixiao Palace, Honghuang gave them some help and gave them a seat. After all, he was a famous old man in the wilderness. But compared to their Kunpeng brothers, does this red cloud still deserve to be called a good person? Even lifting shoes for Kunpeng is not suitable. This wave, called Sincerity, is the ultimate skill. After Kunpeng invested in Zhundi Jian, he did not intend to gain any benefits from the two of them in a short period of time, everything was for the purpose of laying out the future. But in the eyes of Jian Zhundi, they became the Kunpeng brothers who didn't care about gains or losses to help the two of them. Kunpeng saw that there were still piles of severance pay that he had just said he wanted to give to these little brothers on the ground, which were the natural resources and treasures. I feel that since I have reached this point, it's better to continue doing this favor. Pointing to the natural resources and treasures on the ground, Kunpeng said to the receiving guide. When I was refining the Demon Master Palace, I still had some heavenly and earthly treasures left. These were all given to the two Taoist brothers together. It was only under my command that I refined the spiritual treasures. I was shy in my bag, only these were given to the two Taoist brothers. Jane and Zhuanti widened their eyes, never expecting Kunpeng not only to send people, but also to continue sending resources. Listening to Kunpeng's tone, he had already emptied his own fortune while refining the treasure, but he still took out his last bit of inventory and gave it to the two brothers. At this moment, Zhuanti remembered that he had taken Kunpeng's seat while in Zixiao Palace, and his heart was filled with great regret. I'm so damn it. I want to decline, but I can't bear to part with it. Kunpeng also saw their predicament, so he waved his hand and threw it into their arms. The two were deeply moved and could only tearfully say, Kunpeng Daoyou treated my brother like this, and we have no way to repay him. We can only say that if Kunpeng Daoyou needs me and my brother in any way, we will not refuse. Kunpeng suddenly became confused. He originally thought it wasn't just him acting, the two people across from him were also acting. Because he has always maintained the impression of the two of them in his past life's novels. Cunning, shameless, and lacking in morality. But I didn't expect to see a day when their true feelings were revealed. However, upon careful consideration, Kunpeng also understood. Although in typical flood and wilderness novels, the content that is written with accurate references is very lewd and disgusting. But you have to admit that with so many people in the wilderness, only these two brothers have the most persistent and pure ideal of revitalizing the West. We have always worked together and worked together. Unlike the plastic brotherhood of Sanqing. There has never been a conflict between Jane and Zhuanti. Even if there is something, the two of them will carry it on together. So Kunpeng suddenly felt that his move was somewhat inexplicable. Inexplicably, he also gained inexplicable benefits. After careful consideration, Kunpeng felt that these two people from the West could indeed be friends. Mainly, other saints don't look up to him either. It goes without saying that Sanqing, transformed by the primordial spirit of Pangu, can also be considered as the second generation of the righteous and red seedlings. However, the heavenly sovereign of the Yuan dynasty clearly looked down upon him as a wet-born and egg-transformed person, a person dressed in hair and horns. Lousy, such an old coward, cannot be considered a friend. As for Tong Tian, he can still make friends, but Sanqing has not yet separated, so he still listens to his two brothers. After the 3 cleanups, it was En Yuhua, who, according to later records, was a sage of salted fish. I probably don't know which step I took. After the creation of the human race, the Virgin Mary, as a human race, was also indifferent to the human race. The refining of the witch-slaying sword killed 99% of the human race, and the Hua Emperor, as a demon race, also disregarded the demon race. During the Lich-Demon War, the brother who protected her and obtained the seat in the Zixiao Palace refused to save her. Although there may be reasons for being obstructed by other saints inside. But since my brother can't even save someone, can we still save his Kunpeng? Although he later entered the primitive stock of the human race, is that still him? So En Yuhua also passed. Now at first glance, it seems that the only sage who can be won over is the one who is allowed to take over. And the cost of bringing them together is also the lowest. Just like this time, he gave some people, some natural materials and treasures to the two of them, and they were moved to the point where they wished they could share their hearts and lungs with him. If you send these to Kunlun Mountain for a try, maybe not even the people from Sanqing can be seen. So, investing in advance now is a clever move. Throughout Kunpeng's long history, he has only invested twice. The first time, of course, was Hongjun preaching, after all, Dao Zu was the first one he proposed. Of course, the gains were quite abundant, including the Northern Shenyuan water control flag, which is one of the 5 banners. The second time is the Western second brother. Of course, there has been no return yet. Kunpeng said to send someone as soon as possible, and even waved his hand to help Zhuan-Ti pick up and lead the person to the west. After all, when the 2 of them were caught by Kunpeng, they had already filled the crowd. The introduction and admission of the 2 were certainly more touching. I think Kunpeng and his brother can really make friends. If it weren't for the fact that the West is so barren that they can't even compare to the North Sea, they would have wanted Kunpeng to enter the West. Kunpeng led his people and Jian Zhuan-Ti to Mount Sumi. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Kunpeng Daoyou has a childlike heart. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Kunpeng Daoyou has a childlike heart. It wasn't until Kunpeng arrived at the western boundary that he realized that what Zhuan-Ti Jian and the 2 of them said about Western poverty was not just a one-sided statement, but rather a true poverty. The interweaving of strong demonic energy and spiritual energy leads to the chaos of spiritual energy, with demonic energy rampant. Basically, areas with residual demonic energy are barren. The Earth's veins were also unable to connect and form an effective spiritual cycle due to the self-explosion of the Dragon Han cataclysm, which caused the groups in the East and West to be unable to connect. It's not that Kunpeng is exaggerating, he even thinks that finding a place in the East where birds don't poop is probably better than here. No wonder the West now only has the power of Zhuan-Ti and Jian, while the East is full of flowers. It's really true that only these 2 people can be offered on this land now. Kunpeng also gained a deeper understanding of why Hongjun directly gave Zhuan-Ti the holy throne to lead 2 people. After Luo Gui exposed himself, the Western cause and effect fell on Hongjun. Now that he had seen it with his own eyes, he realized that this cause and effect was too great. It's not just 2 holy positions, even if it leads to the rebellion of the immortal path and the establishment of the Buddhist path, Hongjun did not stop it. Don't underestimate the step of self-reliance in Buddhism and Taoism. This step directly divides the energy of the immortal path, and can be considered as directly defecating on the head of Hongjun, the founder of Taoism. But Hongjun remained unmoved. However, due to the recent major battle, Sanqing's relationship broke down, and there was no obstruction in the cause and effect of seeking to lead Zhuxian Zhujian to break through the heavenly sword formation. As for people like Nyuhua, who want salted fish but not salted fish, who can't be rotten and lie flat, there's no need to say more. So Zhuan-Ti and Yinin successfully transformed from Western Buddhism to Buddhism. Speaking of now, the environment in the West has also led to innate deficiencies and acquired deformities in the living beings here. According to Kunpeng's words, calling them crooked melons and cracked dates can be considered a way to elevate them. No wonder Zhuan-Ti Jian had to go around to kidnap people, and he also understood why Zhuan-Ti Jian was so moved by the fact that he was sending someone off. Kunpeng felt a little sympathy and was willing to take the lead. 2 creatures born in the West and supported by the entire West, their luck is also bound here and cannot be separated. So it must be our responsibility to revitalize the West. And the West is in such an environment, without the strong ability to crush others, and can only rely on throwing and rolling shamelessly. If one could be a face person, who wouldn't want to be a face person? However, after reaching the sky above Mount Sumi, Kunpeng's feeling suddenly changed. Although the realm of Mount Sumeru may not be as good as the blessed cave in the east, the quality of spiritual energy is no less than that of the ordinary realm in the east, and even higher. Unlike in previous places, cultivation has become a problem. Arriving inside Mount Sumiya, Kunpeng first landed on the ground, and then smiled as he took a slightly slower step towards Zhuan-Ti, saying, 2 Taoist brothers, this place can also be considered as having a unique cave. Zhuan-Ti Jian shook his head with a bitter expression, sighed, and then respectfully said to Kunpeng, "Thank you very much for sending me off. Although the West is barren, I also hope that you and I can stay here for more time. We can entertain you well and discuss with each other. Kunpeng is now a beam of light in their lives. At first, he disregards past grievances, but later he even gives money to people, and even helps people deliver to Mount Sumi. When Junti and Jane were on the road, they also doubted why Kunpeng was so kind to them. The two secretly transmitted messages to discuss whether Kunpeng was plotting something against them. But after careful consideration, it seemed unnecessary at all. Others don't know how poor his two brothers are, and now he can't even bring out a top-quality innate spiritual treasure. What can Kunpeng calculate for them? But in the wilderness, isn't it somewhat unreasonable if we don't calculate others? So they thought about Kunpeng from head to toe, looking at the situation from Zixiao Palace to now. Kunpeng is not the kind of sycophantic and deceitful villain they initially imagined, but has a childlike heart. Why? When he tried to please Emperor Dao Zu, people at that time thought he was flattering, so they were very contemptuous. But what if he's serious? Is he really thanking the Taoist ancestor for his preaching kindness? In this way, it would also make sense for him to emulate the teachings of his ancestors in Beihai. Since he can abandon his own cultivation progress and preach to the Beihai creatures, what problem does it have to contribute to the revival of the West and his two brothers? When I recall being robbed of a seat in Zixiao Palace, most people would be very angry and even think about trying to get it back. But Kunpeng walked away very calmly, without any attachment. Thinking about the other people who listened to the teachings with them in the Zixiao Palace, not to mention Sanqing and even Honghuang looked down on them. Kunpeng was willing to be with them and help them so much. So this kind of Taoist friend is simply a beneficial friend in life, and of course, my brothers and I should cherish them very much. If it weren't for the fact that the West is truly impoverished, they wouldn't want to drag down Kunpeng. Now they all want Kunpeng to join directly. Kunpeng also felt the enthusiasm of the two, but thought that he still had something to do and was constantly searching for resources to revitalize the West. Kunpeng felt it was better not to disturb him. There are still some things that need to be dealt with in Beihai, so let's not delay the two Taoist brothers. If you have time, you can come to Beihai for a chat. At this point, I suddenly thought of the problem of the chaotic Western geography. After thinking for a moment, I keenly realized that there seemed to be my own operational space inside. So we continued on to say. Not long after, there will be another trip to the West. Could you please trouble the two Taoist brothers to entertain us then? After finishing speaking to the two of Jiang Junti, he looked at the original team of the Demon Master Palace and said. We need to work diligently and build with dedication in the West. Kunpeng's words are actually a reminder to them. Because according to the development of the Honghuang plot, it is estimated that Emperor Jun will not have much time to establish the demon clan. When the demon race is unified, Beihai cannot be alone. Kunpeng is also not confident in dealing with both Emperor Jun and Tai 1 or 2 at the same time. After all, although Tai didn't know how to use the Eastern Emperor bell, he just smashed it randomly. But even if a congenital treasure is smashed randomly, it is not something that current Kunpeng can tolerate. Unless he exposes his cards and takes out the chaos ball. Now when these young brothers come to the West, they will be totally different. In the West, as long as you work hard, you can at least mix with a Luhangguo after you become a god. If you are lucky, you may all mix with Buddha. Although the scale of the Lich demon catastrophe is large and has caused great harm to life, it has not brought the disaster to the West. Not only did it involve witchcraft, but it also did not see any losses suffered by the West. Not only did it not suffer any losses, but it also gained a lot by relying on divine power. The root cause is still that during the Dragon and Han cataclysm, the West suffered too much damage, and even the heavenly way did not want to continue to flourish. So being a primitive shareholder in the West is better than being cannon fodder in the East, right? Although Junti Jian still wanted to keep Kunpeng as a guest, Kunpeng said so and did not persuade him to stay. After bidding farewell to each other, Kunpeng showed his prototype directly and walked up with great momentum. Jian and Zhuanti looked at the horizon from afar to see each other off. After no longer sensing the location of Kunpeng, the guide slowly withdrew his gaze, sighed, and looked around at the creatures that had just been brought back, saying, Kunpeng Daoyou has a childlike heart. Zhuanti also nodded fiercely. You and I must always remember the kindness of Kunpeng Daoyou. Then we began to deal with the creatures brought back to Mount Sumeru. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. I was just misunderstood by others. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. I was just misunderstood by others. Kunpeng returned to Beihai shortly after. His main purpose in returning to Beihai is to deal with the monkey he saw when he just left. Returning to the original site of the Demon Master Palace, the monkey was indeed still waiting there. As soon as he saw Kunpeng return, he ran smoothly to Kunpeng and said with all his body and soul, Farewell to the Demon Master. Kunpeng waved his hand and lifted it up with a strong force. Good at listening, able to understand, knowing before and after, everything is clear. But the six-eared macaque. And the six-eared macaque, whose body had just been lifted up by Kunpeng, suddenly knelt down and said, It's exactly 6 ears. Kunpeng watched as it knelt down and shook its head, saying, I owe you cause and effect, there's no need for that. Kunpeng's handling of the six-eared macaque is certainly not due to his overflowing sympathy, as he looks pitifully at the six-eared macaque. Just because the name Kunpeng, the Demon Master, was called out by the six-eared macaque, he wanted to solve the problem of causality. The characteristic of being good at listening, able to understand, knowing before and after, and everything is clear has also allowed the six-eared macaque to seize the opportunity. I heard that Kunpeng was the first to call Honghuang Dao Zu in Zixiao Palace, and Honghuang bestowed a top-quality innate spiritual treasure, so he took the lead in calling Kunpeng Demon Master at that time. And Kunpeng thus obtained the title of Demon Master, and formed a causal relationship with Liu. Just like when Kunpeng called him Honghuang Dao Zu before, Honghuang gave him the Northern Xianyuan water control flag to clear the cause and effect. As a 6-year-old, besides necessary causes and effects, the fewer the better. What is necessary? For example, the cause and effect of the Demon Master is necessary. Not only can one obtain merit, but also the blessing of the entire demon clan's energy. After the establishment of the demon clan, the demon clan's blessing on his luck is equivalent to the human luck blessing that Lao Liu will receive as the leader of the human religion in the future. Even surpassing it without fail. Of course, this is necessary. 6 ears is clearly unnecessary. Kunpeng put down a dandelion and placed it under Liu's body, then asked, What are your demands? Although Kunpeng has been refining tools for hundreds of years, he also pays attention to the situation around him. Seeing that Liu is not leaving, he knows he must have something to ask for. Liu knelt down again and looked pitifully at Kunpeng. Begging the Demon Master to teach me how to practice. Upon hearing the intention of Liu's arrival, Kunpeng immediately felt very normal, because Honghuang said that the law does not spread to Liu. And now Honghuang has already taken the position of Dao Zu in advance, so who dares to teach the six-eared macaque to practice? But that someone else, Kunpeng is certainly different. Since the last time he shouted to Emperor Honghuang to accept it calmly, Kunpeng felt that he had grasped the essence of getting along with Honghuang. Kunpeng heard Liu's words and chuckled, but remained silent. But at this moment, the six-eared macaque was in a hurry. He didn't know if Kunpeng's path was feasible, so he quickly praised Kunpeng. The Demon Master preaches for all sentient beings in the wilderness, and he is a compassionate person. However, Liu has wasted the path, seeking guidance from all sides of the path for nearly 1,000 years, but he has never been able to do so. He also asks the Demon Master to guide me in the maze. Kunpeng's expression was stern as he looked at Liu and asked, Do you know why others don't want to teach you how to practice? Liu nodded, hesitated a bit, but finally gritted his teeth and whispered. It's because Dao Zu didn't allow it. In the Purple Sky Palace. Jun, who was fully immersed in the heavenly way, slowly opened his eyes and realized that he had noticed the Kunpeng. Don't underestimate the sage, as long as you recite his name, you can know it in the wilderness. This is the sage of the heavenly way, let alone the existence of Jun who embodies the heavenly way. At this moment, Jun also showed a hint of interest, wanting to see how Kunpeng would say he was handling the matter of Liu. Is it to slander him later, or to simply kill the six-eared macaque and end this cause and effect? At that time, his statement that not spreading the 6 ears was only a temporary idea, while suppressing 6 ears was because he was eavesdropping outside. I am a sage preaching, but you, the golden immortal, have not paid my respects and are still eavesdropping on my words. What are your ingredients? It's good if I didn't kill you directly. After hearing Liu's words, Kunpeng sneered. Joke. Dao Zu doesn't allow it. Liu felt a sense of distress in his heart and then said. Indeed, it is not allowed by the Taoist ancestor. Even the 2 Western Taoist priests dare not accept me. The demon master should know that the ancestor once said, the law does not spread to the 6 ears. Jun was even more interested, and he wanted to see how Kunpeng, who was usually very respectful to him, would view him in this matter. Jun, who was observing from outside the sky, can it be called eavesdropping in my Dao Zu's opinion? I call it monitoring. Honghuang, and Liu, who was on site, heard Kunpeng burst into laughter and then said. What kind of person is Dao Zu? He preaches 3,000 words, paving the way for the flood and wilderness, but he will also be unable to get along with you. As for the others, they just flattered and misunderstood the meaning of the Taoist ancestor. I saw Kunpeng sitting upright, as if on a pilgrimage, saying. Dao Zu and his elders are worried that their holy words may not be fully understood by others before being transmitted to others, causing all beings to be unable to understand the law. This is because the law is not transmitted to the 6 ears. It is not transmitted to the ears of a third person. Jun, sitting in the Purple Sky Palace, was taken aback for a moment and thought to himself. Is that what I think? After a moment of further reflection, it seemed that Kunpeng's statement was more in line with his glorious and great image. Yes. That's what I think. Then he also shook his head. Only Kunpeng understands my meaning. After listening to it, Liu was ecstatic. Since Kunpeng said so, does it prove that it has a play this time? Liu has really hit countless walls during this period of time. Of course, if he knew that it wasn't until after his journey to the West that he reluctantly infiltrated Buddhism and became the true and false monkey king of the 99 and 81 difficulties, he would probably collapse. Because after all, the fake was killed, although it is possible that he became the real one. Is life like this occasionally or always? Always like this. Think about the 6-eared macaque, a character from before the Lich Demon measurement, who ended up fighting back and forth with a monkey who had just emerged from the Western Journey measurement. And they all have the qualifications of the 4 monkeys of the mixed world. You said it's not outrageous. Kunpeng saw Liu ecstatic, his expression unchanged, and then said. Do you still hold grudges against Dao Zu? Upon hearing Kunpeng's words, Jun, who had already prepared to retract his gaze, stared back. And the 6-eared macaque's heart gave a fierce jump, afraid to speak. Resentment. He certainly harbors resentment. He was originally a golden immortal cultivator, but due to Jun's cold snort, his cultivation dropped directly to a heavenly immortal. My own divine powers have also been largely destroyed due to backlash, and I don't know how many years of cultivation it will take to make up for it. It's impossible to say that you don't hate Jun. Even Jun himself thinks so. Just as Liu was thinking about how to answer, he heard the sound of Kunpeng coming from afar. Do you know that Zu is doing it for your own good? Both Jun from outside the sky and the 6-eared macaque with lowered heads have a bewildered expression on their faces. Jun thought with some confusion. Am I disabling his divine powers and cutting off his cultivation, or is it for his good? And the same goes for the six-eared macaque. Kunpeng originally thought he could seize the opportunity in such an occasion. The first person to call him a demon master had something, but he didn't expect his qualifications to be so foolish and uninspiring. Shaking his head, he said. What was your cultivation level when you eavesdropped on the Taoist ancestors' preaching? After hearing this, Liu was stunned. He didn't know why he wanted to ask this, but he still replied. Jin Xian. But Kunpeng threw his sleeve and said angrily. Do you know that Zhu was talking about the way of the great Luo at that time? What would happen if you, a small golden immortal, forcibly eavesdropped on the way of the great Luo? Do you think you would benefit a lot or become obsessed with it? After hearing Kunpeng's explanation, Liu immediately burst into a cold sweat from behind. Then I heard Kunpeng continue to say. Dao Zu is very kind and compassionate, correcting your mistakes for you. He is afraid that you may not know how to live or die in the future and use your divine powers to eavesdrop on others, which will lead to the disappearance of the Tao. That's why he sealed it. As for causing your cultivation to decline, it's just a warning to you. But how dare you still hold grudges against Dao Zu? When Jun heard Kunpeng's understanding in Tianweixian society, blush. Well, Kunpeng, this child actually thinks of me that way. Immediately, his face changed and he thought to himself. No, that's what I thought at the time. I was doing it for the good of this six-eared macaque, but I was just misunderstood by others. Then there was another sigh. The vastness of the wilderness, only Kunpeng knows my intentions. Request for follow-up reading, request for tickets, end of this chapter.